Good afternoon, Brian.
How are you doing, sir?
I'm doing well, thanks. I've been tossing the young one back and forth with my wife all day because he has a fever. So it's like I have a call, then she has a call, and we've managed to work out our schedule so that every hour we just like pass each other and do the handoff. So um, yeah, I'm catching up here.
Yeah, very well.
How are you?
Doing good.
Good.
Gas clutch.
Yep.
Representing for Quantars.
Oh, nice.
I just
I didn't know we
noticed.
had t-shirts. I should hit you up
Yeah,
for
they
one of those.
came along, through the midst of the whole thing. You can see that's a whole guitar
Yeah,
deal there.
I'd love
That's
one of
my
those.
youngest son, Quana. He's an expert of the making of guitars now at this point.
Yeah, a shout out to Quantar. Um, so so somebody said something to me today that I realized is something of a rabbit hole or a layered thing. So this person said, I guess this was the way of the universe showing me that dot dot dot. And I thought, I'm sure that doesn't mean to you what it means to me. And then I'm not that sure what it even means to me.
Uh,
So, and in this case, I wondered, um, well, I wondered, if it means different things to this person at different times too, and so there is something to it. And I think you and I have probably used that phrase too. It's kind of like the, uh, like in the context of us talking about, there seems to be a new chapter beginning, like we're responding to something the universe is telling us. But man, it's so easy when we think the universe is telling us something to interpret whatever our ego or our shadow wants to interpret. And on the other hand, when is the universe not telling us something? so I so there's something in to like reading the tea leaves here that I wanted to toss out there. Like what do we mean by the universe telling us something? What does that mean to people, not necessarily to you and I?
right. Well, the image that I get is of a ventriloquist talking to his own hand. What do you think? Well, I think, right. And the reason that I say that is because of the ontological goo. And I think that we can understand that intellectually, which we've poked at that, that goo a number of times from a number of directions. And what that means for folks that haven't heard that before is that when you say there are certain presuppositions that are set up in the asking of the question. And if we unfold the presuppositions that are foundational to the question, we often find a different answer to the issue than the question implied. So what that looks like here, once again, I push on the pronouns. And or the subject object distinction, because the ontological goo, ontological meaning of the study of being, as in what it means to be, what we mean when we say a thing is, and the fact that the way our consciousness comes into the world says, I am an I, a subject, thrown under, and then there's the world outside, which is the object or the thrown out, right? So I've got two thrown things, which is interesting because then the phenomenologists, Heidegger talks about, we've come into the world with a thrownness. And that's that Latin term shown up as ject, right?
I didn't understand how you're using thrown, the internal and the external. Uh, can you go over that again?
Well, subject,
Yeah,
the ject is the throne.
yeah.
So subject is the thing that's thrown under us, so to speak. And object is the same ject, the same throwing, but so it's thrown out with that
Okay, so
prefix.
you're talking about the etymology.
Exactly. And that the etymology suggests that the thing that created the distinction between the sub and the was the throwing or the being thrown.
Okay,
So when someone like Heidegger says we're thrown into the world, what that the implications of that thrownness is, this wasn't under our own power that we got this. We were launched out of a, you know, out of some woman somewhere, right? And and then boom, here we are in the universe. And we didn't get to choose. There was no, where do you want to be? What do you want to be? How do you want to be? We didn't get to pick anything. And that's part of that thrownness. You're passive, but you're undergoing, a radical movement, not under
momentum.
not under your own steam, right? So that's the ject in the process of this beingness coming about. So when we say the universe is saying something to me, we're saying that there's this me over here and there's this universe out here, and that there is a fundamental separation between the two, such that a communication needs to happen as well as can and did happen, right? And if we pry into the nature of this being and the nature of meaning, right? Because this wasn't just that was the universe sent me a message. The universe conveyed meaning to me as a meaning seeking, finding, creating being, right? So so we're saying that there's this relationship that has a transactional nature that's fundamentally made out of meaning, right?
Okay.
So this becomes another version of mind body problem, because that's been one of the things I've been thinking about is the ways we go back and forth across the mind body thing. Like this is one, right? It showed up in my mind, or showed up in the world, then showed up in my mind, then showed up on paper. So there was a mind body and a physical with actual things my body had to manipulate to make it show up. Um, but so this idea for the universe to send me a message, I have to stand in a place that doesn't see myself as the universe sending itself a message that I am. Right? In other words, I'm the universe's message to itself as much as any payload that the universe has to communicate to me. That's part of the nature of this, what I refer to as gooiness. It's sticky. It doesn't, is it this or is it that? Well, it kind of goes between the two. And, and the subobject we're talking about, or a subject, the, maybe we need a new prefix in front of ject. Uh,
Yeah, probably a good idea.
yeah.
Um, let's come back to the the new prefix. I'll think about it. Um, but at the same time, so that's kind of like blowing it up. Um,
Close it up
at,
from the foundation.
yeah, a layer above that, or a few philo dough layers,
Uh-huh.
is we do get information from the universe. So for example, when we throw the I Ching, we're very intentionally querying the universe, if you will. So So let's talk about that layer a little bit.
Well, in the paradox of that layer is that the the connection between that small self and the universe that sends the message is meaning. So it is, I get that meaning by way of the gooiness, so to speak. I I take meaning out of the world because of my being in the world. The fact that I don't exist independently. I am tangled up in terms of the dependent originations. The world caused me and it put me in conditions in which I could arise. And so that's why I say I am a message to the rest of the universe as much as the rest of the universe, all of it is a message to me, right? It's that wake up to find out that you are the eyes of the world. Thank you, Grateful Dead. And so it's curious because the meanings that we will take, if we're getting them from the universe as opposed to looking at the sky to see that it's going to rain, um, are by virtue of the ontological gooiness. That
Let's pause
that
there because what you just said, like, there's a difference between what we mean when we say this is the way of the sky telling me that it's going to rain. Dark clouds are the way the sky tells me it's going to rain. I don't think anybody says that. Maybe,
uh-huh.
but it seems um, equivalent to this is the universe's way of telling me that it's going to rain, or this is the universe's way of telling me dot dot dot, right? But it's different. There's a implied um, interpretive layer or an
Sure.
implied subtlety or
Well, the
um,
interpretive layer is what I'm trying to point to with the
yeah.
gooiness, right? Because it's based in meaning, and I'm the creature that looks for meaning. So you could think of the display as offering all sorts of meaning, but the meaning I take away from it, I've referred to before as the meaning I resonate out of the landscape, is based on meaning that I've integrated a place for, at least within my ontological model,
So
my cognitive model.
not only should we practice hermeneutics, we can't help but practice them.
And that fact means that we begs the question of us having to look at how we do it, the seat from which we do it. What are the effects of that seat as opposed to other seats in time and space? Uh, but also that the other way to say this is that we go out into the universe we go out into the world rather to find ourselves. And I don't mean this necessarily in a hippy dippy way. I mean that when we go out and interact with the world, where we find meaning and what that meaning is and how we develop it through our interaction with the world is a face of who we are, right? And given a different person, different things would resonate out of the same setting, right? There, but for myself, go I.
Mm,
As the old saying goes, right? Or
almost how it goes.
wherever you go, there you are.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that can ruin everything, right? So, I think we might have made reference to this, the old joke where the new person moves into the neighborhood and goes to the old person and says, "What's it like in this neighborhood?" And the older neighbor says, "What was it like where you came from?" Once he describes as well, it's pretty much the same here. Then the other new neighbor comes and describes exactly the opposite, coming from the exact opposite place. And the old neighbor says, yeah, it's the same way there too. Because the interpretive thing we carry along with us. I think we mentioned that before, that in my somewhat indecorous Jabba the Hutt reference, that we don't take each new piece of meaning and put it into a perfectly cleaned palate mouth, that we put it into a huge gaping maw that has all of the other digested and partially digested bits of experience all mashed up together, and this goes into the mash. And I think a lot of fermentation goes on in there. I mean, I don't have to get too graphic, but
It seems like
you
a
get my,
terrible use, yeah, a terrible waste of good sushi.
yeah, exactly.
Throwing it in there, yeah. Um,
but but the idea is that we're in process with the experience that we have of things. And that's why I'm always pointing at dispositional knowledge rather than just propositional knowledge. Because dispositional knowledge points at our relationship with that interpretive function and with the object we're interpreting, and our understanding that what we're seeing is our own hand. Like when you play with the cat with your, I used to call it secret mouse, right? When your hand is under the covers and the kitten jumps around and tries to find where the mouse is. Well, it's almost as if when we try to find meaning out in the world, it's like we can't see that the meaning that we're chasing is the secret mouse that is our own hand under the covers, making things wiggle so it gives us the thing that we want to leap onto and say, this is it, I've got the mouse now.
hmm,
It's a beautiful metaphor.
mhm.
Right? But you have to be both the kitten and the hand under there. And then that gives you the idea of how, you're here interpreting the world, but you're also, the world is what you're pulling out of it and reacting to and translating out of it, interpreting out of it. And that's
Yeah.
both the trap and the doorway to meaning, right? It's the trap because if we get in a bad loop, like, oh, that means, nobody loves me. And then everything gets interpreted as that because we have that meaning internally. And so we want to resonate that out of every experience externally. Or we've gone through life in a way that has curated our positive experiences of the good and the beautiful and the true and the just in such a way that now that's what we resonate out of every new momentary experience. That's what we pull out, because when we resonate with all that accumulated time body of experience, and everything that resonates on a similar frequency starts to move, and then we pick it out of the landscape, if that makes
So,
sense.
so, let's say the cognitive model that you have around this is fundamentally anything that's to be said about, I guess this is the universe's way of telling me dot dot dot, um, has not only an interpretive element, but a confusion in the cause effect um, links.
Or it's just part of an unfolding that
Yeah, yeah,
that
where both
we
cause
hit.
and effect are unfolding.
Yeah, like
Um,
for example, a few months ago, I started noticing birds catching bugs on the wing. And I saw this 3 or 4 times. And I realized I don't think I've ever actually seen that before. Like I've seen the birds doing that, but I never saw the bug.
mhm,
Whereas here, I actually saw the bug flying along, see the bird take evasive maneuvers, the
mhm.
bird adjust and adapt, and then whoop, and it was over, and he had part of his breakfast.
And
And I
what was the
realized I
universe's way of telling you?
exactly, and this is the nature of omens, right? Or the time I had the thing with the horn great horned owl, and it was really like, you get it? Are you sure? Are you sure? You're sure? Okay, I'm sure. You're sure? Okay, and then one more time. Are you sure? Okay, I'm sure. And then so so yeah, there is some interpretive function, and the this happens or can happen only because of it's the same medium where in a ceremony we might experience some feeling of a telepathic synchronicity in experiencing something that's not physical, in a five senses kind of way. Um, because of this, the dimension of meaning is the dimension of mind. And, a lot of your physicists that get way out at the end of their branches end up coming back saying, well, basically it's everything's mind and there's only one of them. And this would all kind of fit in with that. And that's why you can play this game with yourself and it's actually the universe on the other side and vice versa. Right.
Maybe let's come back to that ontological goo level in a few minutes, but let's stay on the mystical level. There is, even if we understand that um, the mystery and the unfolding and the um, nature of being and having a self are all part of the interpretive process. There still are times, like when you saw several birds catching several flies on the wing, and realized that's something you had never noticed before. You could infer all kinds of messages from that. Uh, from, I guess it's time to plant the beans, to uh, what does that represent metaphorically, like the plover, right?
Right.
So there's a metering involved in that part of the interpretation. Like the interpretive piece that we were talking about prior was more about how we're projecting our own meaning and understanding of meaning into the question itself. And so we get back a reflection of our projection. But what I mean by interpretive now is, can we separate wheat from chaff to some degree, and um, or maybe not, can we? What faculty is it? And maybe that's more a psychological and mystical question than a philosophical one. What faculty is it that allows us to make useful interpretations of objective information? How do we turn it subjective correctly?
Yeah. Intuitive intuition, introverted intuition, basically.
Same word.
Um, um, well, see, for example, when I noticed that I was noticing the birds, uh, I didn't come away with an interpretation of that. I noticed it and I posed it to myself as a formal question. Wonder why I'm noticing all these birds catching bugs in particular. And I connected it to all the attention I've been putting on quail raising lately, and that I've been turning in the small bird direction, or are they small dinosaurs? Um, but that there was maybe a content there yet that had not disclosed itself. And I guess I haven't felt the click. Whereas the nice thing about the plover If folks didn't catch that one, the thumbnail talks about life in the dangerous middle. But the way the plover thing happened was the unconscious sort of threw it up on the beach, and then the threads were relatively easy to follow after that. With this one, I think I need a little more input before I'm providing too much from the daylight side, if that
Yeah,
makes sense.
yes. Okay, so
So
there's a monitoring that you're talking about doing between like how much am I inserting my conscious mind that is more in the objective realm versus allowing the unconscious faculties, the intuition, the shadow, the world of symbols to leak out, meaning that I could glimpse without
right.
filtering.
Right, right, and that's that connection, and this is all purely on the dimension of mind. Body isn't really the separation here. This is the distinction that really Sigmund Freud gets the credit for, but honestly, who discovered this first? The very first shaman, right? So it's kind of an old game. Um, it's just the idea that that you could somehow study it with the tools of the daylight and
That
bring
was
it in.
Freud's breakthrough. Yeah.
Yeah, was to say, oh, there's this thing that we don't know about, and it turns out it carries our history and develops around that history, but there's more to it. And then Carl Jung, with that next generation, got a feeling for there's more into it. And then you get your Joseph Campbells on top of there saying, yeah, look, this more that's into it involves all of culture and all of language and all of human civilization's collective what it is, right? And then you get people like Hegel saying, well, that's what the real story of what's going on is, that story of this spirit or this mind that's got a universality that shows up through all the little humans, like the will of the beehive shows up through all the diverse bees. And so um, and this is all part of that gooiness, that meaning isn't something that sits aside from the stuff of the universe. That's that scientific predisposition, what we call scientific, that really is who I've been reading about, denuded, sort of denuded of life. Anyway, this idea that when we our scientific approach takes so many dimensions out, reduces things to magnitudes, and we lose the dimensions of qualities.
Mhm.
But that in fact, it's the realm of qualities that glues everything together, because that's the realm of meaning, not just uh, 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 magnitudes with relationships charted out. Something more going on there that involves meaning, right? And and how does that show up? I think we've mentioned this before, but it's worth saying because this is the connection to interpretation, right? Is I can't remember his name, but Homie was talking about having a coffee cup. I've talked before about it, or a teacup in his office, and the teacup had belonged to his mother, and the handle had been broken off, and it got glued back on. And so whenever he drank tea out of that cup, he reminded him of his mother, and then she had died not that long before. So that in turn reminded him of the frailty of life. And that in turn reminded him of, here is this item that holds this meaning. And so that sort of brought him to absorbing meaning in every moment that we can, and that the dimensions of our life that are made up of meaning. And then there's the normal coffee cups that sat next to it on the shelf, that was its beginning and its end as far as meaning was concerned, was pretty much it holds coffee pretty well. And you can spill it into your face with a handle. So who could see those differences? There's no way a scientist could measure that because it's relational, right? Well, that meaning is part of that relational transaction between the pseudo inside and the pseudo outside, or the way that the universe is playing with itself through meaning across matter. So but that idea that, okay, now he's got all this stored under coffee cup, stored under that coffee cup in his model, his cognitive model. So similarly, every new piece that he brings into his world that's rich, that finds a place to live in his cognitive model, becomes an element to resonate with each new piece of experience that he has to integrate. So it increases the potential meaning that he can milk out of experience, right? And so remember, meaning is that dimension that makes human life human. And because that's what we examine for, right? We examine for meaning. There's not anything else to examine for, right? So or we examine for truth, for aletheia, which I made reference to a last episode, I think. The is another alpha privative, just like we had with anaxistasos. The that makes it that cancels it out. But this is aletheia. Well, letheia means both hidden. So aletheia is then unhidden, but lethe also has overtones of forgetfulness. And it's that. So it's when we've unforgotten that we encounter truth. And that, of course, is where Plato gets his whole theory of that truth is remembered. That when we discover truth, we're doing a remembering, not just a first time exposure kind of thing. And that's where he does a famous exposition with a slave boy. And just by asking him questions, he walks him through a theorem of Euclid and shows that the boy, through his own good sense, could find his way through the questions as long as, Socrates was there to lead him through it. And so that he was just able to say, what did I do? I just asked questions. Is this longer than this? Or is this, So I didn't provide any answers, but it was within him. And the questioning was able to bring the truth out from within him because he carried it already. So if you think about what that says is, you already carry the truth within you by virtue of this gooey participation with everything. So all that remains is for your experience to be integrated in a way that enables you to resonate all that meaning out of things. And that, in fact, the juiciness factor could be related directly to your ability to drag meaning out, right? Because remember, this all happens in a timeline that has an end.
The danger there, of course, is to ascribe meaning, um, to think it up instead of remembering it, I suppose.
Well, that's maybe where that examination comes in, because we disclose it.
Well, and that's where we
Right.
get people saying, I guess this was the universe's way of showing me that I need to eat better, or I need to, like, actually, there's no way I could finish that sentence because the quality um, isn't isn't objective. They might be it might be a good interpretation that this is the universe's way of showing me that I need to eat better, right? The heart attack I had, or the the oh, I don't think I can land it that way. So let me say instead, there are people that and that I know who are running around taking superficial in inputs and making superficial interpretations out of them. And maybe the question is, how do we hold a mirror up to ourselves and create accountability, I guess, for um, making good interpretations? Like what you said a few minutes ago about, I might need more information so that I don't overbalance the daylight part with the shadow part, or the unlit part.
Right.
Um, how, right? And I think your answer is going to be
Experience.
about dispositional knowledge.
Well, it's going to show up as dispositional knowledge, but what it is, if we deconstruct it, is integrated experience or heuristic fine tuning.
Integrated is the word doing the heavy lifting there.
Yep.
Um, so people my age with equivalent seconds of experience might make wildly less superficial or more superficial interpretations than me. So
Right.
it's how do we integrate that experience? There's like a
Well,
feedback loop that theoretically we all have, but they don't all work the same.
we have to realize that within culture and within groups within culture, there is accepted and unaccepted magical thinking. Like I remember somebody commenting about a political election, and one of the candidates for president of the United States made some reference. I don't even remember which one it was because I'm sure they all do it, but it was reference to, God wanted me to be president, or I heard God say, and this was some talking head, some pundit was saying that, some people take comfort in that. But what would you think if he had said, instead of God, he had said, say, an electric fan or a toaster? Obviously, that would have been a cause for concern. I was sitting there at breakfast, and the toaster said to me, clear as a bell, "You are the man." Right? So the question here is a reality check. And the more, this is why Saint Teresa, one of the Saint Teresas, told one of the novice nuns, when she was in prayer and she saw the Virgin Mary, she kept coming reporting having seen the Virgin Mary. And Saint Teresa told her, well, next time you see her, spit in her face. This is similar to why we say if you meet the Buddha on the road, kill him. Uh, because the fundamental tool, right? Just to come back to the popular one string banjo tune, consciousness, conscious of consciousness, means that you absolutely have to be giving every conclusion some sort of an acid test, and at the same time not let any babies go out with the bathwater. So there's a type of, I mean, and this is as a what would the word be? Certified shaman completely with a diploma and everything. I'm telling you, you have to be very, very skeptical about your own magical thinking. And you have to bring it back to the here and now. What does it do? Right? This is where the American pragmatism comes in. Don't, this I've been wading my way through more of these German idealists, and I've been more and more coming to the conclusion that I think Wittgenstein came to later, which was that everything is a language game and that you can spin yourself off. And this is really where those folks that saw our episode with Ken Leong, he gave an official name to what I have called the urge to thingify. And in philosophical terms, it's called reification. And this is one of the things that the German idealists get accused of all the time, and not without good reason. And that is that language becomes so real that these abstractions become things. They become as if things to us in our mind. And then they start to confuse us by implying realities that may or may not be reinforced by actual reality of bathrooms and restaurants. And so this is again the mind body problem. The two have to bear a certain relationship to each other, or else it's all fluff, which is actually a back way into the conversation that we had briefly about Socrates, you know, which is we all have this image of Socrates just spouting off a lot of this and that, like the crazy guy in the marketplace, the agora is where he would be, and he would be engaged in dialogue, a self-described gadfly, right? Stinging people in their private parts was how he described himself. But what we don't get told about is that in the Peloponnesian War, I think it was, Socrates was in a number of battles late into his 40s, and that he was renowned for being able to march forever in the snow barefoot. Or when they were retreating, he was at the back of the retreat, facing the enemy as everybody else with another famous general. And that he rescued the general Xenophon, who also was one of his students, right? And so his reputation preceded him uh, because, of how he performed in the world. Now, when we see, Socrates painted by Raphael in the School of Athens, for example, he's gesturing up in this to the air, and he's on his tiptoes, and everybody wants to say, "Oh, well, that's because he was just this idealist guy who just was floating off into the ether." And Aristotle, who's gesturing to the ground, who's firmly planted, flat-footed, he was the one that was practical and pragmatic and was interested in specific things and not ideas of things and all that. But Socrates was a hoplite soldier, which is as real as a punch in the nose, and, grueling for years. And so, we know about Socrates through Plato, uh, but, and a lot of people say, well, Socrates, he was a character that Plato came up with. But in fact, we know that Socrates was a real person that, was a teacher of Plato. But it was the Oracle of Delphi who, according to Plato, said that there was no man wiser than Socrates. And it was Xenophon said that what the oracle said was that there was no man as just and as upright as Socrates, which is a slightly different, although one would think that great wisdom would come with justice and uprightness. But wisdom seems intellectual, and uprightness and just seems to tell us, puts his money where his mouth is a put up or shut up. He was also a brick mason, right? Which is a very here and now material. So yeah, he was floating off and he came up with the ethos and the ideal and all that, but he was not someone that was using philosophy to escape reality. He was in the down and dirty gnashing of the ugliest parts of it. So, interestingly, he said that of judges, we want people not just that know the good, but we want people that have known the good and have known the bad and have chosen the good, which is very different than to say we want good judges.
It's actually really analogous to the thing. I know I've heard Jordan Peterson say it. I think I've heard others say it too. I don't know where it started, but the rap about how there's been so much emphasis over the last 20, 30 years on trying to teach boys to not be aggressive. And what we really want is men that can be aggressive and can control it. It's really basically the same idea.
Yeah, yeah. Well, and it's also the same idea as Jorge, Dr. Gonzalez Ramirez would say in his ceremonies very frequently that when you're in an intense ceremony, this is your time to review your life, to see what is good in it and what is not good in it, and to choose what's good.
That last part's really important. That's
Y-
the agency bit. Seeing is
Right.
it's taking the propositional into dispositional
Into
seeing.
dispositional. And it's presupposing a degree of consciousness conscious of consciousness.
Hmm.
You can't bullshit yourself and expect to get results from this, right? You have to start from where you are. That's the beginning of the examined life, is to really understand where you are,
Well, I
because
guess
that's where you
the
move from.
problem that we're pointing at some is when we bullshit ourselves. I think it's fair to assume a large part of the time we don't realize we're bullshitting ourselves, or we wouldn't. So, um,
That depends on
yeah,
our relationship with the outside world.
say more.
And well, certain personalities develop certain relationships based on maybe insecurity or what they think is necessary to get what they need to survive. And they might have come away with a less than honest relationship with reality.
I think that's all of us.
Well, I think maybe it's a matter of degree, but at a certain point, there is maybe the proof is in the pudding, because the degree to which we aren't honest with ourselves, uh, it will assert itself. And that's the beautiful thing about this idea of, knock and it will be opened unto you, seek and you shall find, is that if there's a sincere will to see the truth, then you ultimately will make your way to it.
How does that work? I mean, given everything else we've been talking about, is that the remembering
I think it has to
or the
do with
unforgetting?
the part of the self that uh, Tibetan Buddhism might refer to as the mind oriented towards enlightenment. That it's actually the the remembering of truth because of the participation as the universe embodying meaning and embodying the understanding and appreciation of meaning as part of the yin and yang of meaning, right? And so, uh, uh, yeah. I mean, I think that it's a certain inevitability, but the idea necessary, that there will be, um, there's this popular idea of the enlightenment of the human race, and maybe that happens at the end of the final yuga. Uh, but I think that the nature of the mechanism is such that there's always life spread out across the spectrum. And so that we're always sort of pushing up against that gravity, and that there's always a spectrum of people, that we're never going to see everybody necessarily manifest all of the potential of consciousness, conscious of consciousness. And that's where we get this idea of, well, there's some new souls that need to do some cycles before, or the idea of karma, that if we don't operate with a certain amount of sincerity, we'll get flushed down further down and be a barnacle for a few 100,000 cycles or something. So, and we see occasionally human behavior where we go, this might be barnacle worthy. I have to admit, sometimes I think this might need a few go rounds as a mollusk of
I
some
might
sort.
be I might be a little cynical right now, but I think there are a lot of people who think that they're genuinely seeking, and what they're finding is does not further. and I'm not convinced that there's a comeuppance that they'll experience that rights the ship, even if their seeking is authentic. Um, and that's a bummer.
It's hard to say. It's hard to say. And
Well, it's
because we
hard to
never
say what because authentic's not a binary, right?
yeah, we never really know. And you know, we just my feeling is that the human evolution or the great Tao or Hunyuanchi, however you want to put it, is like gravity in a Pachenko machine. And it's going to ensure that the ball moves down. But whether it hits the pin and goes to the left or hits the pin and goes to the right, and whether it does that for 3 or 4 cycles before it comes back to this side or that side, there's no accounting for. That is left to the unfolding of actuality. But that there is a general tendency that a general direction in which the Pachinko balls all seem to move, though they hit numbers of obstacles that deviate their trajectory, they still all kind of move under the influence of that or the interaction of that influence and whatever obstacles they hit on the way, quite literally. Right. So that's kind of the way I imagine it, is a big, huge Pachenko machine of souls. And,
And what
that
is it that's not gravity, but that is acting on the causing this downward motion that's inexorable?
it's actually we've visualized typically as the upward motion. I just used it because the
Right,
Pachenko
right.
machine has gravity,
There's
right?
gravity, yeah, but
Elan Vital,
um,
according to Henri Bergson, that is that
uh,
force that drives life, that causes evolution, that sends evolution out in a bunch of different ways, not diminishing and diminishing until it arrives at the perfect creature, but instead it spreads out all over the Pachenko machine. Right, big Pachenko machine. And this would be the Pachenko machine of being, right? Because you've got all the varieties of the spectrum going on there, from slime molds to what is it right next to that, politicians, and then we get into the single celled life forms, and then mammals, and we make it up to humans. And yeah, I mean, I think that it's all driven by that same force, just like the Pachenko balls. um you know
I think that might put a cap on it for now.
hmm
Yeah, awesome. Thanks, Brian.
Sounds good. We will see everybody next time.